Hello, my name is EHarris, and I interviewed my father, Thomas Mastromarco, for this older adult presentation. In the background of this slide, you can see a picture of my father with his family in their hometown in Gravina, Italy. He is the little guy in the white shorts in the front. During this presentation, I will walk you through my father's immigration story during his adolescent years. I chose to focus on the transition years of adolescence to narrate my father's story by looking at his development through the lens of Erikson's psychosocial theory. Erikson describes adolescence as a psychological stage between childhood and adulthood and refers to it as the last stage in childhood. This is the stage where you start to search for your personal identity. It's an awkward stage where you try to figure out who you are and who you want to become while struggling with fitting into your environment. This is the time when your sense of morality is formed and teens start to test their boundaries. During these already challenging development period in his life, Tommaso Mastromarco boarded a plane from his small village in southern Italy to make his journey to the United States of America when he was 17 years old. My father is one of 8 children, born into very poor conditions in Gravina, Italy. The whole family worked in the fields to provide food and income to afford their small housing quarters. They had no knowledge of the outside world beyond their town, so when it came time to board the plane, my dad didn't want to go and had severe anxiety and doubts on how this large metal vehicle was going to stay in the sky. Needless to say, he got a severe case of motion sickness, which added to the already traumatic experience. Since my uncle was turning 21 in 3 days, they had to leave quickly as soon as the paperwork came through, so my grandfather took my uncle and my father with him and left his wife and other children behind to join them later. The only thing my father ever heard about the United States was that the streets were lined in gold. Arriving in New York and seeing the bustling city and cars was like landing on a different planet. There were many more challenges to come as they made their way from New York to Philadelphia to live with my father's oldest sister, Vinnie, and her husband Nick, who came to America 10 years prior. My uncle Nick was an American-born soldier who visited Italy during the war and met my aunt, who he went back to marry a few years later. My uncle Nick was the catalyst who helped get the paperwork and process moving to move my father's family to the U.S., a process that took about 5 years. He owned an apartment in the Port Richmond neighborhood in Philadelphia, so he moved them into his apartment until they could find more suitable housing. 3 weeks upon their arrival, the local Italian church told my father he had to start school immediately, which was not easily accessible without a car. They put him into junior year at North Catholic all-boys high school due to his age, but he couldn't speak any English. This frustrated my father because he was always among the top of his class in Italy, and now he didn't understand anything and had to start from scratch. He was teased and bullied and never ate lunch because he couldn't read the menu. He started taking community English classes 2 to 3 nights a week and learned how to take public transportation, including the L and buses, to get to and from school. He was dealing with a lot of acculturative stress on top of the common adolescent challenges. My grandfather was not acclimating to the American culture well, so my father had to find part-time work to help support the family since his 2 oldest brothers stayed in Italy with their families. Despite all of the challenges he faced, my father was very resilient and driven. His accounting teacher, Mr. Fitzsimmons, was the first one to really make an impact in his academic life. My father scored the highest grade in his class since he excelled in bookkeeping in Italy, and numbers are a universal language. He was the only one out of all his siblings to further his education past the grade school level. Another accomplishment and turning point was making the soccer team his senior year. Father McLernan saw him dribbling a soccer ball by himself one day and called him over. He was a grumpy priest, but he saw something in my father and gave him a shot. They went on to win the All-Catholic and All-State championships that year, and he still has his Letterman sweater to this day. St. Joe's College offered them all a full scholarship, but my father passed it up because he knew he had to go to work to support his family. The other big life event happening during this time was meeting my mother at the church carnival. They couldn't speak to each other, but they still fell in love and became best friends. They went to the senior prom, which he had never heard of before since they didn't have them in Italy, and he still remembers one of the guys on his soccer team picking him up in his car. Desperate to help out the family, he asked his coach where he could find some part-time work. So he told him to go down to the docks and see this Irish guy. My dad didn't understand everything he asked him to do, but he knew they wanted him to unload the truck to see what he could handle. Well, he finished early, so he took it upon himself to clean up and sweep the dock. The owner, Leo Holt Sr., came back and couldn't believe his eyes. So he told my dad to come back tomorrow. Well, he just retired from Holt 57 years later after receiving the Chilean Chamber of Commerce Lifetime Achievement Award. Erickson believed that the goal in life is to move through the developmental stages by resolving crises in each stage to promote growth and development. According to Erickson, crises are the psychosocial efforts to adjust to the demands of the social environment. They are normal and can be anticipated. However, as in my dad's case, there are also unanticipated traumatic events. The epigenetic principle states that everyone has a biological blueprint that dictates how you grow and mature. Social forces influence your development, which determine how well you adjust to the environment. My father faced many traumatic experiences during his immigration process and upon his arrival. He had to leave behind his friends, family, and everything he knew, but he said he never looked back and doesn't regret it. He was very resilient and said that he didn't have time to dwell or be depressed. He had to power through and adapt to his new environment so he can make something of himself and help support his family. While assimilating to the new environment, my father never gave up on his cultural identity and had a strong family connection and support system. The biopsychosocial factors that impacted his crisis resolution included social class, language barriers, discrimination, and oppression. Despite these challenges, there were many social forces that influenced his growth and helped him adjust to his new environment. This is evidenced in his resiliency and ability to quickly adapt, which minimized his risk for mental health concerns. My father's self-confidence led to successful crisis resolution, which helped him develop the virtue of loyalty and fidelity, according to Erickson's theory. Working at the same job for 57 years and being married for 54 years definitely proves that theory. Despite their low household income and cultural differences, he still had a very strong and supportive family. They had faith in him and supported him to follow his dreams. There were also outside factors and people that took a chance on him and changed his life, including his local Italian neighborhood, his soccer coach and accounting teacher, as well as the man who offered him his first job and continued to support his dreams and be a strong male influence in my dad's life. My father got to travel the world and help build that small trucking company into a global distribution center. Looking at all the systems in my dad's environment during his adolescent and young adult years, he did have the support from his family, community, workplace, and his girlfriend and her family. However, the institutions, especially his school, could have been a more positive influence, but they did not offer any support or resources for immigrant students. They just threw him into a regular classroom with no direction. Schools are the ideal setting for protective factors, since that is where immigrant adolescents spend most of their time and where they experience the most acculturative stress due to language obstacles and bullying. School-based mental health programs can help facilitate and overcome barriers to mental health services and provide a safe environment and school connectedness. Schools need to educate all students and staff on being more culturally competent and compassionate, especially with the number of immigrant students exponentially rising in the U.S. today. These types of social support systems build positive relationships, which can decrease the negative effects of acculturative stress. Despite the lack of school support services, my father was able to build his self-esteem and keep his ethnic identity and didn't let it stand in his way of his achievements and development. According to Rogers, in the Human Behavior in the Social Environment textbook, Humanistic and existential theories are centered around people being active agents in their own development. This is a strength-based model versus focusing on problems. Erikson concentrated on predetermined stages that could be predicted, whereas the humanistic theory feels that relationships between a person and their environment are dynamic and constantly changing, so you cannot predict human behavior. They both agree that the primary goal is self-actualization and striving to become your ideal self. However, their concepts are quite opposite. I feel this model better fits my father's story. He was able to use his strengths to be resourceful and motivated to achieve his goals and success. Being an immigrant, he had a different view of life and his purpose for existence, so he had no choice but to take control of his life and play an active role in shaping his experiences. While I agree with the concepts of Erikson's psychosocial development, there are still limitations. This model forces people into predetermined stages based on age and does not take other environmental factors into consideration. It is also very abstract and hard to measure, as Erikson never clearly defines terms such as adolescence and personal identity. This creates a lot of uncertainty and confusion as people have different interpretations of these ideas. Due to the ever-changing landscape and societal norms, the stages need to be adapted and changed along with them. It also doesn't account for different cultures and minority groups, as their journey to identity differs as well. Whatever lens you decide to look through, it's evident that we go through stages of development throughout our lives. But based on our environment, both at the micro and macro levels, it has an impact on your ability to build relationships, which develops your role and identity, and as in my father's story, can eventually lead to a successful and fulfilling life. I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I enjoyed learning about my amazing father and the story of his life. Thank you for watching.